Good morning, friends! I'm about to make some sourdough bread, and so, well, somebody offered, hey, artists, you should put some of your art online. And I'm a graphic designer by trade, well, like the interface designer now. But I get kind of nervous, performance anxiety, when somebody says, do your art! And then I feel like, oh no, it must be the art if I do it. So I get kind of seized up in a little, writer's block, creator's block. So I thought, I will just make some bread. I'll show you how I make bread, which is kind of creative and definitely creating a thing. And it's kind of a neat process. I would like to make sourdough bread. A friend of mine, Jennifer Mervine, posted a while ago that she had some good success with a Yukon yeast that she got from Sourdoughs International. So I bought some, and it's quite nice because you can make it real sour if you want to, or you can just kind of make it fast and it's pretty bland. If you've got family members who don't like sourdough, you can kind of get by with the, potato bready flavor of sourdough. So what I did was I took my starter last night and I added some room temperature water. And the room temperature water, I believe that you don't want to shock your yeast with cold water, but more importantly, you don't want to put the chlorine that's in the water in with your yeasties, because the yeasties do not like the chlorine. So you want to let it gas off for a while anyway. I like to let it gas off for about 24 hours, but the recipe says just let it sit out for a couple hours. So I did that, and I've got about 2.5 cups of starter here that's all foamy and fabulous. Like a head on a beer. Very similar thing. And then the recipe that I'm following that I got from Sourdoughs International, I believe. Oh no, wait, this is the quick sourdough recipe that I got. And you can see it's well used and got schmutz all over it. So I'm going to add 1/2 cup of milk and a tablespoon of butter and a teaspoon of salt and a tablespoon of sugar. We're kind of trying to conserve milk, so I used almond milk, so this will be kind of interesting to see how this goes. I'm going to put this in here. And then I'm going to add about 3 cups of flour. And I keep it in one of these really handy containers over here. So handy with all the crap in the way. A 1. A 2. And before I add the 3rd cup, I'm going to kind of mix this up and see how it's doing, because I might need a little more or I might need a little less. So here we go with the beater. Why aren't you using the dough hook, you may ask? Well, because I'm not actually kneading it yet. I am mixing it at this point. We'll get to the kneading point. This has a dough hook for the kneading. It's kind of good, but it has a habit of beating the crap out of the dough a little too fast. So I found that just a couple of swipes of actually hand kneading is a little easier. And I've figured out the shortcut, which is not putting flour everywhere and just kind of keeping it in my hands while I knead it, which is kind of a nice, back to your childhood playing with Play-Doh sort of thing. So I'm going to do this, so it's kind of mixed in. I did put a little extra starter in here, so I'm kind of, I was a little heavy-handed on the starter, I think. I'm probably going to need a little more flour. Mostly just kind of want it to get not runny. So I'm going to add just about 1/4 cup more. And once you've done this a couple times, you'll get a feel for what a good dough is going to be. I think I might be there. Maybe a little more. I've messed around with olive oil doughs where you're pretty much just adding, I think it's just olive oil and salt to the flour and water. And those are really forgiving. And once you've done those a couple of times, you get an idea for what it's supposed to turn out like. See, when it pulls away from the beater like this, then I feel like it's in a pretty good state. So I'm gonna scrape that off of there. See that empty sink behind me? I did that for you. Well, and I guess for me, so that I wouldn't be embarrassed. It's not like I've had company over in a while to clean the kitchen for. Although Doug's been doing a great job of keeping the kitchen clean. And cleaning up the house too. It's wonderful when you've got a mate who takes it seriously. All right. Now this feels a little wet yet. Like if I put this in my hand right now, it's just gonna run over the sides. So I'm gonna mix it in my hand a little bit. This is what I'm doing. You can see it just needs a little more flour. Now it's getting to the point where I can put it in my hand and it's not going to run all over the place. My friend Stacy's the one who told me about, Stacy Kilpatrick is the one who told me about the olive oil dough. And if you are making dough for the first time, I think it's a great way to go. It is absolutely fail-safe. Although you don't start with sourdough starter, you start with regular packet of yeast, which I think is a little less intimidating. I mean, when you're working with live cultures, it sort of feels like there's this huge, big professional tool you're working with, and you might totally screw it up and break it or something. Although, even if I totally mess this up, I could take a portion of it and start all over again. It's still got the live little cultures in there. And they're not that hard to keep alive. I have attempted to kill mine several times by starving it in the refrigerator. One time I actually killed it. I think I went 2 months without feeding it, and it turned gray and pink. And I was like, that's not going to be good. So I had given some of my sourdough starter to friends of mine. And I was able to ask one of them to give me some starter back, which worked out great. Now, if I was able to come over to everybody's houses, or if everybody was able to come over to my house, I would say, come on over and I'll give you some starter. But that's not going to work right now. So I would say, if you want to do sourdough, go to Sourdoughs International and try the Yukon is good. But they have sourdough from... what was it? San Francisco and France and Italy, and I believe, if I remember right, the guy who started their website said that he went to somewhere in Europe and had amazing bread, and he said, oh my gosh, this bread is so amazing, I can't get stuff like this back in the States. And his hosts said, oh, well, we made it here, why don't you just take some starter back with you? And he was like, oh my gosh, this is the most amazing keepsake. And so he took it home and he made his own bread, and it was, it was just like that bread that he had on his trip. And he took another trip and he, said, hey, do you guys have sourdough starter that I could use? And just kept on doing that. He ended up traveling around the world collecting sourdough starters, and now he's got this business selling all of his vacation memories, which is a pretty lovely thing. And on the website, they have the history of the provenance of each sourdough. So where it came from, whose aunt started it, whose uncle took it over the pass, which restaurants it was featured in, or all that cool stuff. I think that is really neat to have a little history. This sourdough that I got here, boy, I got this about 2 years ago. So I don't remember a whole lot about it. This is a little too wet yet. And now it's all over my hands. Good thing this thing still got a little in there. And it's getting there. See how stretchy it's getting? That's a good sign. It's not total glop right now. If I can get it all out of the bowl. Alright. So, you can see it's starting to firm up a little bit more. It's still very lumpy, but I'm pulling it out and I'm stretching it. What people do in the videos is they flour their whole workspace and then they put the bread out and they pretty much do the exact same thing. And I hate cleaning up all that flour. I hate wasting all that flour. Although it's not entirely wasteful because the flour gets integrated into the bread, but as long as you've got some flour around that you can kind of like dab it into, this process works. I like it, and I end up not overworking it because when it stops sticking to my hands, I know it's pretty much done. So I'm probably gonna speed up this process a little bit and show you the end product. You can see the texture is getting a little satiny now. I don't know if you can see that. So it's a little less cottage cheesy looking. So as I'm finding little wet spots, I'm kind of dabbing it in the bowl where I've got a lump of flour still. And the change starts happening pretty quick when the dough is getting good and kind of solid, stretching out those little glutens as I understand the process. Okay, so as you can see, it's kind of got a little body now, and it's starting to make these little holes as I'm stretching it. That's a really good sign. And I think I'm going to let it rest now. So right now, it looks like this. So I just realized I've got the steps mixed up. Actually, what it needs to do is sit in a bowl, because now it's going to take on the shape of the thing that I'm going to put it in to bake, which is going to be my cast iron Dutch oven. And what I like to do to make the transfer of this into the Dutch oven easy is put some parchment paper here. I've tried using just my silicone pat in here, but it's just so thick. It makes weird shapes on the bottom of the bread that are kind of hard to make into a good piece of toast. So parchment paper is what I recommend. Parchment paper in hand. So this bowl is approximately the size of the bottom of my Dutch oven. So this is going to work well. The Dutch oven is going to go in my actual oven so it can get good and hot, so that when I put the dough into the Dutch oven, it's going to suddenly kind of crisp up on the outside, and then it'll have a chance to slowly cook the rest of it in. And that gives you a nice crust. So I'm going to get this guy out of the bowl. The olive oil does not hurt your bread at all, as far as I can tell. In fact, with the first bread that I ever made, it was pretty much olive oil and water and flour, and it was quite delicious. I think I'm going to just leave that olive oil in there. I think I'm going to need to work this a little bit, or else it's going to have weird little shapes on the top. I'm going to kind of roll the weird shapes under and kind of tuck it in. Tuck it back a little bit. Okay, and now I'm going to let it sit for about 6 hours, 4 to 6 hours, and then I'm going to show you how I pop it in the oven. Make that more like 3 hours. So, it's been 3 hours, and my lovely bread has been sitting here on the counter in this 80-degree room, and it has risen! And it's really ready. It's ready to go into my cast iron oven. So my cast iron oven has been in my stove and my oven for about 30 minutes. It's getting up to about 375 degrees, so I'm going to pull it out. I'm going to pull this bop in there and start it baking. So I got my cast iron oven here. It is really hot, 375 degrees. Oh. We're going to take this poor puppy that's about to spill, and so carefully figure out how to transfer it. It raised quite a lot, which is great. This is going to be a little challenging. Thank goodness parchment is pretty strong. Wow, it really raised like a big floppy cat. There we go. I don't usually bake with cats, but it's floppy like a big ragdoll cat. Alright, ooh, I can hear it already sizzling in the bottom of my pan. I'm going to put this in my oven at 370 degrees. The wonderful thing about this cast iron pot is that it heats it fast. The cast iron holds the heat so it doesn't suddenly cool off. So that makes the crust crispy. It keeps the humidity in, so that I'm not entirely certain how the humidity works, but you want humidity, because if you were making bread without something like this, you would want to have a cover on it and a pan of water in there to keep the steam in there. Otherwise, I think it just doesn't have a chance to rise and bake at the same time. I'm not certain about the process, but I know. I could not make good bread before I had a cast iron Dutch oven, and now I can. So get one of these. This is the thing. All right, now we got the moment of truth, the bread. So I put it in the oven for 10 minutes on 375, and then another 30-40 minutes on 350. And now I let it out to cool just a little bit. I'm not going to put it on my plastic cutting board. Ooh, oh, it's so pretty. Check this puppy out. Now I'm going to put the lid back on just in case it needs a little more cooking in the center, because I've had, before I started working with cast iron, I would end up with loaves that didn't cook all the way in the middle, which was super disappointing, because then all you can do is maybe toast it and then you've got like rock in the middle of your bread. But if I let it sit in here until it's cooled and it's definitely cooked on the inside, the lid keeps it from losing humidity so it doesn't get all dried out. And it is fantastic bread that all my family has enjoyed. Thanks.